It's funny about the girl working at the Salatstuben, who has dark hair and dark lips and almost no chin, and wears the red and white striped shirt that Neil finds her attractive just like you. You thought you were the only one, but even Kathleen knew her when you mentioned black lips. Does anyone know her the way Neil and I would like to? It doesn't matter. We will eat there, across from Schlappen, and drink Wiedemalz or Karamalz, and I shall always recall the dark of the street as I stepped out of the salon, holding a kebab on the Löwenstrasse, and sitting at one of the tables which they had not stacked up for winter. I began to eat the kebab from the bready end, and started to relax as I watched the people round the corner of Niemenstrasse. Eventually my eyes fixed on the windows of the Salatstuben across the street, and there was Neil eating dinner in the very last window. He did not see me. I got up and went across the street, and when I got very close to the window outside, he looked up. I wrapped the kebab in a napkin, put it in my pocket, and went in and sat with Neil. The server with the dark lips was working. It was shortly before Neil's shift. I took the book along in the backpack with a few other books with me to Elzach. I read in the train and then in a restaurant in Elzach. The waitress could have rid the restaurant of me when she saw I meant to read after I had eaten, but instead she went on doing her work, coming again into the room every little while. When I felt I ought to go out of courtesy, I put everything in the pack, tied it, then put my arm through the strap and got the pack up onto my back, feeling bulky-backed, and walked out into the day. It was cold on the street in town. It had been cold in Freiburg, but I believed it to be colder here. There was snow here that had partially been rained away. Still, we did not have snow in Freiburg. I didn't really think that I wanted snow, though, because then I would not be able to ride the bike. At the corner, walking back to the train station, there were some boys affixing a sign leading to an exhibition of fowl to a lamp post with loose wire. They could not make up their mind how they wanted the sign. It seemed easy to me because it just ought to hang pointed in the direction of the exhibition. I went on by them and on over the bridge over the river. I climbed the rising road and followed it as it curved and then came out at the station. Before heading around back of the station, I looked up the road rising steeply and leveling off where the town became ugly with industry. I went back at the station. There was a girl, alone, reading a book on the bench beside the station. She had her scarf wrapped over her nose and mouth, looking down into the book which, sitting beside her, I could see was French. She was short-haired and very beautiful. The train came shortly after I began reading. I had just gotten back into it when I heard the train, and she heard it, and we watched it as it rolled in. Everybody came off, and I decided it was better to read where it was warm, and I left the girl on the bench and boarded the old diesel train. I hoped she'd come. I sat down and unwrapped the scarf and watched out at her. She only kept reading. I forgot her and went on reading myself. The thing is completed, and I was looking it over for parts to change in the second draft yesterday, when Eve and Steffi came back from the city to the room. I put on my coat, and we all went and took the number 4 to the Kinderklinikum. Eva did not look good, and had 2 blood blisters, and was sitting on the bed and waiting. She had had someone get her a radio and video player, and she had just finished watching The Last Unicorn when we came. The girls gave her the sweets package they'd made. We all sat in chairs. Eva was being fed air from a tube which came out of the wall. A Fastnacht band came marching down the sidewalk, and the girls waved, wearing their Schlafanzüge, from the room. The music was very loud. It went away. I watched Yvonne sitting on the bed against the wall. I noticed how far apart her eyes are, and how they slanted like Japanese eyes. The girl has natural blush. She has the smoothest, most wonderful skin. Ava's mother came too. She sat on the bed. Steph went with me twice to get soup downstairs from an automat. It was nice doing it with her. We all stayed with Ava a very long time, several hours, and other friends of hers came to visit shortly and went out again. They were her roommates, I was told later on. They don't know how really sick she is. Ava's mother left before us. The girls looked cute and silly in their hats, and there had been some fooling around. I promised Ava to bring her some better reading. Sie hat sich drauf gefreut. Miss Eve Steffweff and I took the 910 to Neustadt, and it took over an hour with delays in the Höllental and at nearly all the stations. We waited for the Gegenzug to come, and I said, Gegenzug, there's a word we never have in English, at least in the States. They asked why. Because there are hardly any trains. I sat beside Steffweff. It was safer than the other. I put my backpack there. I read Nick Adams and felt pretty good. I knew I was going to Neustadt with girls whom I loved in a sort of serious manner. It was good to have the book for the delays of train. Eve smiled and the curve of her cheeks showed. I swear she's got gold skin. In Neustadt more snow had fallen. Banks taller than the girls with their backs pressed up against them. Banks as high as trees. The three of us walked along the snowy street and then we went up the steps and into a building. The lenses in my glasses fogged up. I had to look over the top of them to follow the girls through the crowd. Everyone was wearing Schlafanzüge and long hats and drinking beer. It was very warm. I was quite warm under my jacket. Eve was very nearly lost in the crowd. Steph seemed to be the one who knew what we were doing. She went out the same way from the hot hall with all the tables. Was Eve still behind me? There she was, in her jacket. I didn't care for anything and almost lost it all on the icy surface on the stairs outside. I just nearly went. Ground saved me. Some guy laughed. He was shocked when I said, in English, "They ought to put up a sign." A little further down, a man could not get his key into the lock to drive home. He was too drunk. That appalled the girls. There was snow down in the fingertips of my gloves from having fallen. I was just having trouble with it. I reversed the glove to get the snow out. It fell out, and I put the glove back on the right way, but it was wet inside. That ruined the walk for me. We went up the long slope, snowy on the path that rises into town and empties out at the Kreuzung. We crossed the main street and went around the corner where the road continues on straight uphill. There was the steeple of Münster, like a giant glowing pillar against the blackness of the sky where you looked. Around the corner of the Münster, looking down the narrow alley of Kirchenweg in the dark and seeing the great banks of snow at the bottom of the path, I felt happy inside, being with the girls. Then I raised my head coming down the alley, and there was the Kreuz, white and small and standing above the very top of the hill over the city. There weren't any stars. The clouds were just visible. It was very cold. There were banks the height of tables on either side of the alley, running downhill to the park. The park entrance was blockaded by a single bank several meters high. We each climbed the bank and dropped down the steep drop to land on the walk that borders the park. Just beside the walk, the snow stood a meter deep. We commenced to walk the cleared-out path along the hedge line toward the bridge. There was some fooling around between the girls, and I took hold of Steph by her shoulders and tossed her into the bank. She pulled herself out, brushing off the snow. Eve was walking on ahead. I was very conscious of it. Steph threw a handful of powder snow from one of the banks into my face and screamed and ran on down the path. Later there had been a serious war, after climbing over the banks off the path, into the deepness and coldness of the ordinary gathered snow, nearly thigh-high in the open of the park. No one had gone through there nor at the bridge. The bridge was snowed over. You wouldn't have known it was there at all besides the break in the dark running line of the stream. You could still hear the stream running. There was an ice coldness packed into the ankles of my boots below the snow surface, and walking was slow and difficult across the park grounds toward the plains fountain. There had been a serious war and no way to flee deep in the snow, and when Miss Eve had come after me, I was happy and let it happen, no matter what it was.